Now on BBC Two, a change of programme. The famous Shroud of Turin, the reputed burial cloth of Christ, has been scientifically tested and found to be a medieval fake. But has the mystery really been solved? Q.E.D. investigates.
This battered piece of linen, over twice the length of a man, is ancient, stained, and scorched by past fire. An object regarded by believers as a sign sent from heaven. It is the Holy Shroud of Turin. For centuries, this faint image of the front and rear of a man's body in Turin Cathedral has been revered as that of none other than Jesus Christ himself. The center of its wonder is the face, said to be miraculously imprinted on the grave cloth while his body lay in the tomb, waiting for the resurrection. What better evidence for that miracle than the face itself, which reveals its full detail only when seen as a photographic negative? Now, a few square centimeters of fabric from the shroud's edge have been carbon dated by fiery analysis at laboratories in England, America, and Switzerland. Their results mean that the shroud is not genuine. It does not come from the 1st century and the time of Christ. It dates from the Middle Ages. What is the truth behind the mystery of the Shroud of Turin? The shroud cannot now be dismissed as a simple problem simply solved. Its medieval dating merely creates new difficulties. For how could an ancient forger devise an imitation so good that until now it's defied investigation by dozens of modern scientists? Why do comparisons of the face on the shroud with early pictures of Christ suggest that the shroud is indeed ancient? What explains the existence of this, a genuine present-day parallel to the shroud? And do tests in a rock-cut tomb in Jerusalem prove that the unique events of Christ's burial could create a shroud-like image? Q.E.D. has been following shroud watchers and carrying out its own experiments for the last 7 years. Outside the new dating, what is the evidence against the shroud being that of Christ? The first place to look is the tiny village of Lorey, near Troyes in France. The shroud first appeared here in the 1350s, put on show by the family of a knight named Geoffrey de Charnay. This fits suspiciously well with the age carbon dating gave the cloth. The de Charnays' manor house once lay on an island guarded by a moat. Was it here, and not in Jerusalem, that the shroud was created? There's no easy answer. The trail has gone cold, though it still exists for Ian Wilson, who wrote a best-selling book about the shroud. He makes a small discovery on returning to Lorey.
This single stone is all that remains of what was once the house of Geoffrey de Charnay, which is the first place that we can actually positively place the shroud in history. Over 100 yards away was the wooden chapel which Geoffrey de Charnay once displayed the shroud, and this too has long since disappeared. All we have is a medallion in Paris which seems to show one of the expositions of the shroud in Geoffrey de Charnay's time.
Soon after, a local bishop reported that the shroud was faked and the artist known. So a medieval forger could have made it. But the real problem is how the picture got onto the shroud. 6 years ago, Q.E.D. asked an artist and a textile research institute to think out a medieval answer. There's no paint on the original image. It's actually caused by partial breakdown of the cellulose fibres. Dr. Brian Sagar.
Our problem was to find something that would reproduce this, leaving no traces, because we find no evidence of materials like protein or pigments of any kind, of metal ions, with the possible exception of some calcium, which is there in quite large quantities. We tried several materials that we know from past experience degrade cellulose in this way, and in the end we settled for alum, a material widely used by artists in medieval times.
Next, artist Susan Hilton needed a pigment to let her see what she was painting. She chose Brazil wood, often used with alum, and so popular in the Middle Ages that they even named a country after it. You mix it with water, boil it up, filter out the lumps, and then evaporate the fluid to get a perfect pigment. For a canvas, Susan used modern cloth, specially woven to be like the real shroud. That was sized with gum arabic, which contains calcium. Remember, the shroud contains calcium. Finally, a mixture of more gum arabic and alum was the medium to take the Brazil wood pigment. The rest was up to Susan's artistic skill. There's one very obvious question. If an artist was trying to paint the image left by a body under a cloth, why do it as a negative image?
I think he naturally put more paint on the points that were going to be nearest to the cloth, like the eyebrows. And he'd automatically end up with a negative image.
Would he? Let's take a look. Impressive? Painting in negative. Final bloody touches add a bit of colour. And the finished product goes off for a bit of aging. We know that in the 15th century, the shroud was washed, in order, they believed, to test its authenticity. They probably used soda ash to get rid of stubborn stains, like alum and Brazil wood. And after it's dried out, here's the result. It looks good at a distance. And the closer we get, the less we see, just like the real shroud. Chemically, everything is washed away except calcium and iron, as on the shroud. And the effect is strictly on the material's surface. It's very like the real thing. The shroud could have been made this way. And despite popular belief, pollen grains taken from the shroud's surface do not prove a claim that it was once in Israel. 10 years ago, Max Frey, a Swiss criminologist, identified 8 pollens on the shroud as coming without doubt from the Holy Land. Because pollen grains have individual shapes, he claimed to identify exactly the plants they came from. Plants like Zygophyllum dumosum, the bushy bean caper which only grows in Palestine. Or Capparis spinosa, which grows in great clusters on the walls of Jerusalem itself. In fact, pollen grains can usually identify only plant groups, not their individual species. Did Frey push his evidence too hard? Take tamarix. All its species have similar pollen grains and are found from Iran to southern Europe. No evidence for Jerusalem there. Wall-loving Capparis shows how Frey, who was not a specialist, could easily identify pollen grains wrongly. Capparis pollen is easily confused with black nightshade, Solanum nigrum, which also grows in Western Europe. And Zygophyllum has pollen which even experts with local knowledge find difficult to distinguish from that of Linaria. Did Frey eliminate all these alternatives? And why didn't he report finding one particular pollen grain which really ought to be there? Israeli pollen scientist Uri Baruch.
As you can see, olive trees are very common in Israel today and were even far more common in this area during Christ's time. The olive tree produces a lot of pollen and it is well adapted to wind pollination. It is carried very far away, and it is very astonishing that there is not even one single olive grain on the shroud.
No olive pollen? Here? It's not difficult to make a convincing case against the shroud, but it's equally difficult to dismiss arguments put forward in its defense. For many believers, scientific dating will not affect evidence for the cloth's origins with a man who went to his death from an olive grove in the Garden of Gethsemane. Start with the image itself. The face is naturalistic. It's not portrayed in the harsh style used by other medieval artists. And yet it would be very difficult for a forger, even consciously, to avoid the artistic influences of his own time. Next, the marks of the nails which held Christ to the cross are in the wrists. Possible confirmation of this murderous technique, where the nails take the weight of the body, was not available to archaeology until 1968. In religious images of the Middle Ages, the nails are usually placed in the palms. How could a faker get it right in advance of his time? And does the shroud give new meaning to Christ being mocked by his captors? In North Carolina, Dr. Alan Wanger is professor of psychiatry at Duke University.
We feel we have an explanation for an old finding on the shroud. It had been noted long ago that there was a box here on the forehead and a curious V hanging down over the nose. We feel that this represents the image of a phylactery or tefillin or prayer box that Orthodox Jews wear at certain times on the forehead. This is a model that is based both on what we find on the shroud as well as on the first century tefillin that has been found. It has a central box with 4 compartments with scriptures in them, a backing, and then the strap which goes around the head. Even when this is in place, we still see the V down over the nose. The explanation for this, we feel, is that we have a unique situation represented by this model in which the front of the phylactery has been deliberately cut and torn open in order to allow the scripture packets to fall out. We feel that this is a deliberate act of desecration, which would be consistent with the biblical account of Jesus being mocked as a Jew.
Who would be so medievally careful as to add this object to a fake? And from below the Rocky Mountains comes an experiment to test if the image's dried out fibers are exactly what you would expect from the way Christ was buried. Sister Damien is a Carmelite nun in Salt Lake City. She's also an experienced professional archaeologist.
I was sitting here at my desk looking at a photograph of the shroud, trying to hope that something would dawn on me about the image mechanism. And my novice mistress came in and started looking at the photos with me. And she mentioned that he must have, the person whose image is on the shroud, must have had a terrible fever. And the minute she said that, it all started to fall together.
Sister Damien could be the first person to think of asking an undertaker about the temperature of human bodies after death. Her local mortician, Mike O'Donnell, astonished her with the news that bodies can warm up.
The best explanation for this is the fact that cellular death occurs later and that the cells are still active. And however, the metabolic processes of naturally cooling the body have ceased, and a body can reach a temperature of up to 110 degrees Fahrenheit.
It seems almost unbelievable, and in fact, we've in our work been challenged many times on the fact that a body actually gets warmer after death. Most people think it cools right away.
With 10 years' experience as an embalmer, I have certainly noticed that this condition does occur. I can tell you that on a normal day that I'm feeling normal, I presume that my body temperature is 98.6 or thereabouts. As I'm touching these people and positioning them for the embalming process, they are definitely much warmer than I am.
A second cause of temperature rise could happen just before death. Heat stroke hits athletes who push themselves beyond the limit. Exhaustion, lack of fluid, and extreme exertion raise body temperature to danger level. Carrying a cross to Calvary and crucifixion itself could equally cause heat exhaustion. Sister Damien decided the best way to test the effects of high temperature on the chemistry of a body in a tomb was to try it out in Jerusalem itself. Near the old city walls, she and her archaeologist colleague, Dr. Jim Strange, knew exactly the right place. This is the way Christ's tomb was nearly 2,000 years ago. Silent. Deserted. Dr. Strange and Sister Damien had their tomb. Why didn't they use a real body for their tests?
First of all, we needed to simulate a post-mortem fever. That meant that the body had to be heated from the inner core outward. That is, mechanically, that's really very difficult to do with the human body, as you might guess. Secondly, were problems of custom and law and ethics in experimenting with the human body. And when we looked at that complex of problems, it was much easier simply to go with a medical mannequin.
Dr. Strange repeats the experiment in the tomb. First, he sprays the mannequin with an acid sweat solution. Its hollow body is then filled with warm water by Dr. Strange and his wife Caroline. This brings it to 117 degrees Fahrenheit, equaling the supposed effects of heat stroke and post-mortem fever. The wrists and ankles are tied in the positions shown on the Shroud of Turin. Now the body is carefully moved to its limestone tomb. Before it is left to the silence of the grave, it is sprayed again, this time with a mixture of blood and myrrh and aloes. Myrrh is a spice seen here on the real shroud, and this is vegetable extract from aloes. Their dark residues are also found in the tombs themselves. They all played a part in the chemistry which followed the crucifixion. The last step is for Caroline Strange to secure the cloth with cotton rope. A curious feeling began to affect the Stranges. They were no longer carrying out a mere scientific test. They seemed to be burying a man. A day passed. The body of the mannequin eventually grew cold.
We're looking at the results of the experiment. This is number 4. This is our last shroud. We're looking at the back image of the man. Yeah, I know that it looks like a mess to the human eye, but what we're looking at is a human body from the shoulders down to the feet. The image is formed exactly like the image on the shroud. That is, it's formed by dehydration of the fibers themselves.
The image looks unimpressive and lacks all the detail of the shroud. Dr. Strange states that chemically, the two are the same.
Our only purpose was to test the hypothesis that there was a natural image-forming process in the burial itself. That is, if we place an acid body with post-mortem fever in an alkaline environment, we will get an image. We did. Therefore, we conclude that the Shroud of Turin, since its image seems to be formed identically, with no extraordinary means, could be a real shroud.
Sister Damien thinks the results exactly fit the rapid events after Christ's death. The first is, to be ahead of the approaching Sabbath, his body was buried in haste, without time to cool.
The next is that the body cannot be washed, or it removes all of the necessary acids produced in a traumatic death that combines with the alkaline of the tomb, which then reacts with the heat of the body to form the image. And the last point would be is that the body has to be buried in a limestone tomb. Most people who were crucified during the 1st century were thrown into earthen graves, and you don't have the conditions either in contact or substance to form an image. So our work actually points to the fact that the shroud is genuine because it, that is the image theory, fits all of the circumstances of the death of Christ.
These results don't make a perfect case, but it's remarkable there is an image, let alone one which chemically matches the shroud. However, if you believe the shroud was created in Jerusalem, where did it go for 1,300 years? One theory traces it to the city of Edessa in Turkey, then to Constantinople, now called Istanbul, before it reached Lorraine. Once in Edessa, the alleged shroud dropped out of sight to surface again in AD 525. The fresh impact of its face changed the way artists portrayed Christ, according to shroud researcher Ian Wilson.
The oddity is, before the 6th century, Jesus is most often represented beardless and not at all like we recognize him today.
Since then, the image of Christ has been different.
Right back to that time, we find him consistently represented with long hair, forked beard, the recognizable likeness, and with markings that we can seem to trace back to the shroud.
Dr. Wanger also suggests that as far back as the 7th century, bearded pictures of Christ were copied from the shroud. He compares its face with one of the ancient pictures using a system of double Polaroid filters. They mix the images on a screen. Similarities in the shapes of the two faces and positions of noses, eyebrows, and ears can easily be lined up. Dr. Wanger is looking at the face of Christ on a Byzantine coin struck in 692 AD. Here it's mounted in a ring. He can match the main features of the two faces and, in addition, claims to find over 200 minor similarities, points of congruence, such as bloodstains on the shroud.
Interestingly, on the shroud, there is bloodstains over the ear, and as we look at that and rotate the filter, we find that the die cutter has very exactingly incorporated this bloodstain into one of the curls of the hair. As we look at the eyebrows, we find that these are very well aligned between the two. The nose on the coin has been damaged, and so that doesn't align, but we see that the mouth lines up very well too. The beard and the mustache are well aligned. Actually, if we look on the shroud, we find on the neck area there is a fold across there. As we rotate the filter, we can see how remarkably the die cutter has incorporated this fold into the collar of the cloak of Jesus here. This is the first coin with the face of Jesus on it, and we find many of these remarkable points of congruence between the two, which lead us to conclude that the artist was looking directly at the shroud and using this as a model in order to make this very remarkable reproduction from it.
Dr. Wanger's technique hasn't been checked by forensic experts. And was the coin based on the shroud, or was the shroud copied from the coin? But there's a mind-boggling further piece of evidence if Dr. Wanger is right. The circular areas over Christ's eyes on the shroud might be the marks of other coins placed there to keep the eyelids closed after death. Computer enhancement of the area over one of the eyes reveals curious marks on the surface of the linen. Dr. Wanger thinks he can identify the marks.
This is the lepton of Pontius Pilate, or the widow's mite. Here, it has a very characteristic staff on it and some of the letters. We will zoom in on this to show that indeed the image on the shroud is exactingly similar to that on the coin. We see these letters here. That's on the computer enhancement. We see the letter C. As we rotate the polarized image overlay technique, we see that the C on the coin matches up virtually identically with this, keeping in mind that these letters are approximately 1.5 millimeters in height. On the coin, the left strut of the A is eroded, but the right strut is there and the cross piece. And as we rotate to the shroud image, we see that this is an exacting comparison of this. The next letter on the shroud is the letter I, and as we rotate, we see that this again is quite congruent with what we see on the coin. Interestingly, on the coin, there's a dye defect at the base of the A, this small round area that we see here, and as we rotate the filter to see what's on the shroud, the same dye defect is obvious on the image on the shroud. Other irregularities nearby also have corresponding images on the shroud. This coin is struck by Pontius Pilate in Israel in the year 29 AD.
A coin of Pilate himself, struck just before the crucifixion. But the coin's identity is disputed. Are those letters really on the eyes? All the evidence, both for and against the shroud, is so debatable that we need new facts. Can those facts be found in a present-day English parallel to the shroud?
Hello, Mary.
Hello, Moses. God bless.
Are you looking forward to tea tonight?
St. Joseph's Hospice in Merseyside cares for the dying and people with long-term illnesses. Its founder is a Catholic priest, Father Francis O'Leary.
Did Nell tell you about her trip to Rome, Margaret?
Yes, it was lovely.
And she met the Holy Father.
I think I've told it to everybody.
A body outline, which appeared in the hospice 7 years ago, matches the shroud in many ways. It is no longer alone. Like the shroud, this imprint of a dead man's body is faint, but it's a permanent image, just visible on the nylon mattress cover of a hospice bed. It shows the man's outline as he died, lying on his back with one hand tucked underneath his buttock. What created it? As with the shroud, nobody knows. Les, the patient, was 44 years old when he died from cancer of the pancreas. The story of the finding of his imprint is as confused as the discovery of the shroud itself. When Les's bed was stripped after his death, the nurses thought the mark was a stain. They tried to remove it by scrubbing the nylon with antiseptic. But the marks wouldn't disappear. Father O'Leary.
It is remarkable that this imprint has occurred because the patient was lying on a cotton sheet and the image has come through without any smudging. You can see that there are no smudge marks along here at all. Also significant is the fact that the head was lying on a pillow and it has still come through quite clearly defined. So the imprint, in actual fact, comes through a pajama jacket, a cotton sheet, and in the case of the head, through a pillow, to define itself on this nylon material in quite clear lines.
How was the imprint formed? In London, the professor of medicine at St. Thomas's Hospital Medical School is William Cranston.
I've seen the photographs of the mattress cover, and I've had access to the clinical notes and to statements given by people at the time when the patient died. Now, we know that this man had a cancer of his pancreas, and I would entirely agree with that diagnosis. A cancer of the pancreas commonly makes people jaundiced, and there's evidence from the case notes and indeed from the laboratory tests that this patient was very, very jaundiced indeed. So how can we try to explain this distribution of staining and how it came about? Normally, we all break down about 1% of the red blood cells in the circulation every day and make a similar amount of new ones. Normally, these red blood cells go to the spleen, where the iron is removed from the hemoglobin, and it forms a compound called bilirubin, which is green or brown in color. What happens with the cancer of the pancreas is that it surrounds and obstructs the common bile duct so that conjugated bilirubin is accumulated in the body. This bilirubin is then filtered and can appear in the urine in very high concentrations, and this is why the urine in many of these people with carcinoma of the pancreas is a very deep brown indeed. We have evidence from one of the nurses who looked after the patient that he died somewhere between 5:30 and 5:55 a.m. At the time of death, it was found that he'd been incontinent of a brown liquid, not otherwise identified. If he had been incontinent of urine containing a large amount of bilirubin, which is green or brown stained, this would explain the initial distribution of staining around the area of the crutch. But how can we explain how it might have ended up going up to his neck? One possible explanation for this, that strikes me, is the fact that the body was washed about an hour to an hour and a half after death. And it seems to me possible that some of the bilirubin might have been spread up around the side of the body and the neck by that action.
Some 7,000 people a year die of cancer of the pancreas in the UK alone. Why hasn't another imprint been seen before now? Is its nylon fabric unusual? It wasn't easy to track its suppliers to the Lancashire moors outside Darwin. They dug out a sample of the original nylon still in their stores. It revealed unknown facts. The material's a type called nylon 6, and it's protected with a thin coating of hard-wearing polyurethane. Father O'Leary now took the imprint for study by textile experts at the Shirley Institute. They made the shroud replica for Q.E.D 6 years ago. Could they solve this new problem? Dr. Brian Sager again.
Our first thought was that this effect was caused by the polyurethane coating on the mattress cover wearing, and some sweat or other fluid moving the dye in the nylon fabric, much like when you drop water onto a blotter and ink moves and diffuses away from the water drop. So we tried to find this using spectrophotometry.
But this form of analysis shows, to the researchers' surprise, that the dye hasn't moved at all. It's the end of theory number 1. When the imprint is looked at under the electron microscope, 2 more surprises follow. The dark line of the imprint is invisible. The difference between stain and fabric can't be seen. And although the coating of polyurethane over the fibers shows up well, that coating isn't damaged. In this side view, it's the white line, and it's in perfect condition. This doesn't mean that liquids cannot penetrate the coating through to the nylon.
The polyurethane coating on the nylon base fabric is really quite thin in places, and consequently a pressure of really no more than 1/3 of a pound per square inch is enough to force liquids through the polyurethane.
That's no more pressure than would have been caused by the weight of Les's body pressing down on his hand. With that information and a second mattress cover, the Institute now tried using model hands to duplicate the imprint. Witnesses agree that Les lay on a cotton sheet. So, put a hand lying on sheeting on top of the mattress cover. To be sure of an image, use a good, reliable dye. That leaves a fuzzy white shape. But nothing prints out on the mattress cover beneath. What happens if there is no sheet? The hand is weighted to create the same effect as Les's body lying on it. Then the dye is trickled on next to the hand. It pulls itself entirely around the outline of the fingers by capillary action. And 12 hours later, there is the outline of a human hand. It bears a marked resemblance to the hand of the real imprint itself. The stain, like the imprint, is permanent. This really does look like the way the imprint marked itself out around Les's body. It became permanent because his weight pushed the stain through the polyurethane coating. It then fixed itself between the coating layer and the nylon. Another success for the Shirley Institute. But as with the shroud, the explanation is incomplete. It means that witnesses have to be wrong about there being a sheet on the mattress cover. A further test with fresh bilirubin, as suggested by Professor Cranston, did make a stain. But if the imprint is naturally caused, why is Les's, up to now, the only one known? The imprint appeared only 7 years ago. Witnesses are still alive to be questioned. The medical evidence is available. Science has penetrated much of its secret. But it has not been fully explained. There's not enough evidence to make a watertight case one way or the other. What hope then of a final explanation for the image on the Shroud of Turin, which carbon dating has shown did not come from Jerusalem 2,000 years ago? This is a mystery science is never likely to explain. And for the shroud itself, time is running out.
As far as I can see, having been a museum conservator with ancient textiles, the image on the Shroud of Turin won't last another 25 years. The image process is caused by the dehydration of the cellulose of the flax. We've found in our comparison of shroud photographs, this one taken in 1931 and this one in 1978, that already in just, 47 years, the image is down by half. What's happening is that all of the non-image fibers in the normal process of deterioration are also dehydrating. When that level of dehydration reaches the level of the dehydration of the image, it will no longer be visible or retrievable.